Well, hello there folks, my name is Peter and I live here in Victoria, British Columbia on this classic wooden motor cruiser with my pup Geordie, and he's absolutely tuckered and I'm going to show you why. Anyway, we live aboard while doing a complete restoration of the boat, and if that's the sort of thing you might be interested in, why don't you stick around and maybe subscribe. Cheers! Holy smoke! Friggin' blizzard in Victoria. This just got started, and there's 2 or 3 inches down. They're calling for 6 to 10 inches of snow in Victoria, BC. Okay, so that's been fun, but it's time to get back to work, and that means finally tackling this door, because I'm getting a little tired of having to use this blanket to keep the messy part of my life from the slightly less messy part of my life. So, all doors begin with a frame, or in this case it does, and the only substantial piece of sapele mahogany I have that I can get my hands on, although there's some more underneath my bed that is 1.5 inches, or it's actually close to 2-inch stock, is this piece here. Now, it's not a particularly beautiful piece. The grain is not too straight. It has quite a lot of swirl in it. But, you know, that's okay for this because it's not a flat plank that has to stay flat. It's going to be a relatively small section. So I've got to design it, figure out, and then there's a heck of a lot of table saw work. Yeah. The door is basically going to fill this hole in my 3/4 inch mahogany plywood bulkhead, and it just needs a frame that wraps onto the bulkhead and creates a door stop for when the door is actually in its closed position. Pretty straightforward. We'll do a little doodle of it. At the top, I want it to be as tight to the overhead as possible. So there'll be very little frame at the top so that I don't have a headroom issue as I come through. And at the bottom, an interesting thing is going to happen. These existing stairs are an absolute disaster, but the door is going to be at this plane, right? And the nosing of this step will actually project out. So the door is only going to come to here, not right to the cabin sole in the aft cabin. So it'll land here and swing away so that the bottom of the door will actually sit on top of the tread of that step. Okay, so let's design the door frame itself. So I just showed you we have a piece of plywood. That's the bulkhead. That's 3/4 inches thick, both sides, and looking down on it, the door would be below. So if we magnify this up here, that's the plywood. I'm going to build a door frame that basically comes something like this, with a door stop on it, and back again. So all of this is going to be made out of that mahogany. And the door will sit in here like this, and with its hinge pin there, so it'll open like that. So all of this is going to be made out of the sapele mahogany that we're going to do today. So basically I start with making a rectangular section, and then I'll plow out a dado for the plywood and plow out a corner, basically a rabbet, for the door to sit in. Let's get to it. All right. All right. Flip it over. Crikey, this is a pretty substantial piece of wood. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I don't know how many of you watched that happen. My beautiful LED overhead lighting here should never have been allowed to pull this much current through. Yeah. It's literally melted. I can't wait to see the footage if you're watching that just gloop and screaming at the screen going, "Stop!" Idiot. I can't tell you how stupid I'm feeling about this bloody melting the light thing. This thing's like 15 amps or something. It's got to say on the end of that, like maximum 2 amps. Poor thing, I murdered it. Well, hello friend, let's see if we can get you busy. Okay, Okay, so now I've plowed it out to 1/4 inch, and I know the blade is up by 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do now is work from the other side and start cutting out the rabbet for where the door closes against the doorstop. The only piece that will be remaining will be the doorstop. And because it's already set to 1/4 inch, I'm just going to take some successive cuts off this corner. Anyway, you'll see as I do it. Let's go. Alright, there we go. A full rabbet for a 1-inch door to come in. Fantastic. I just love it. Now a little tidying up and we can install those. Wouldn't a dust collection system on a boat be cool? So, nice. Perfect. Okay. I love it. Holy moly. I have a door frame. Now I just need a door. Huh. Let's do that tomorrow. I also messed with the timeline a little bit last week. The episode ran long and I couldn't put everything in it that I'd shot. So one of the other things I'd done is put this overhead in, and some people had noticed that. Very, very keen eyes. And I also finished up and epoxied the thwarts for the cockpit, and they're in place now, and I'll show them to you now. Cheers. I gotta get rid of this piece of masonite, which has been driving me crazy, and it's gotten damaged over the last year. I've been moving it around. It's basically the material for the last 2 sections up here at the front of the overhead. Now, it's a compound curve meeting a straight line. Yeah, we're gonna see how it works out, but I want to do it and get this wood used up and not have to look at that anymore. All right. Okay, so I haven't shot much of this because it's not that interesting watching a fella trim a piece of masonite to fit into an awkward curve. What I can tell you is it's going okay. Because it's got a curve down here, this opening, this seam here, has to take a bit of a curve to it, so I got to take a little bit off the ends, and we'll do that with the power planer. See how that fits. Cool. There we go. I don't need these markers anymore because I have nails to show me where I put that. Well, to tell you the truth, that was a lot easier to spring that in from a straight line to a curved line than I thought it was. It's actually holding together relatively nicely. This edge doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to get another strip of mahogany with more of those low voltage puck lights in it. So let's do the other side. Inside is even easier. Marvelous. Alright, well, with that done, let's move on to some real work, which means building the door. You know, these bloody things, which are the fronts of the lockers in the cockpit, as well as these 2 pieces, which are the thwarts, are kind of in my way too. And on a beautiful day like today, maybe I should just get them done. It means sanding in here and making a pile of dust, but I gotta blank it up. Don't seem to get too much dust into the aft cabin anyway. I think maybe I'll just jump into finishing these and getting them out and into the cockpit. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So this is pretty straightforward. These are screwed and bunged. Just knock off the bungs, sand them down, sand them out, get some oil on here, and get it done. All right, we've been here before, haven't we? All right, knock them down. Oh yeah. You've seen plenty of this. Okay, so let's carry on with the actual thwarts. Some of you will recall that I started to make the thwarts last year I have them here. Now these have been sitting around for a year now, getting damp and dry and damp and dry. And sometimes they develop a bit of a curve. They're looking pretty good right now because I've paid some attention to keeping them dry on the same humidity on both sides, which keeps them from warping too much. So what I'm going to do is give this one a sand, because this one never even got finished. Give them a final check for flat. Maybe warm them up in the sun a little bit to make sure that any side that's still a little bit convex pulls flat. And then I'm going to seal them up with clear penetrating epoxy sealant. There's still work to be done to them, but I want to get them sealed because it's been too long that they've been sort of racking back and forth like that. So anyway, let's just sand this epoxy off. Okay, so this is how this is going to work out. Basically we have three components. We have the front piece, the center piece, and the aft piece. And basically only the center piece lifts up, and it won't lift up like that. The hinge will actually be on the top edge of this back piece here. And the reason for that is to create continuous waterproofness. Waterproofness is the word? Because cockpits on wooden boats are a problem because they fill with rain, and that rain is fresh water, and fresh water is death for wooden boats. So got to make sure it's all cascaded down to scuppers and overboard, not down into the bilge, and certainly not down into the workings of this thwart. So the idea is these will be hinged from the top. That's a waterproof joint. It'll cascade over. It'll drip down onto the cockpit sole, which will have scuppers. Now the problem is the water that lands here and here. This is up against the bulkhead. The reason I have this extra piece and not straight against the bulkhead is because right here I'm going to create a little gutter in plastic, and I'll show you all about that. But anyway, any water that comes over this edge will land in that gutter and travel forward. Same thing at the aft end here. There'll be a gutter there, so water that lands here migrates down there, will carry forward and down. I think that's the plan anyway. Because these two pieces don't move, they'll also get a little matching back piece, which I just haven't done yet. And rain that drives through here and ends up there is caught down and onto the end of the gutter. The gutters will obviously clog and they'll need to be wiped out regularly. Most sailboats, fiberglass molded sailboats, have exactly the same thing. Very, very deep channels. So that even when they're healing, they will drain, but don't intend to do too much healing. So anyway, so these are pretty close to getting ready to seal up. This one is just slightly convex, so I'm going to go put it in front of the heater for an hour or so and get that good and flat. Got a few other things to do. Okay, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm putting clear penetrating epoxy sealant on all the pieces of the thwarts. I got to make sure all the sides of these pieces are sealed, because if humidity gets in, they'll cut. It's very ambitious to think they're not going to cut anyway, but I'm going to do my very, very best. So the product, CPES, Clear Penetrating Epoxy Sealant, is very, very thin epoxy. It ends up about the consistency of diesel fuel. It's mixed 1-to-1. The brand I'm using is Smith's. There's several people that make it. Anyway, you paint it on, it's super thin, it soaks in. Let's put some more on. Okay then, that's done. I hope you can hear me because I'm not taking off the respirator in here yet. This stuff is particularly nasty. So, I've got everything. Both of them center sections are on there. Seriously saturated with several coats, well not several coats, but applied and applied and applied until it will not soak in anymore. Really pleased with that. Anyway, when you can hear me, I'll come talk to you again, but I gotta get out of here. Such a gorgeous day anyway. Cheers! Okay, so it's the next day and it's all dry, and oh my gosh, it's almost like varnish, well, except it has very little UV protection, so this will still get coats and coats and coats of varnish, which will have to be sanded off and renewed every year for some UV protection. And of course, in time, it will lose this beautiful deep red, and the sun will turn it more golden and yellow eventually. But in the meantime, I'm feeling very good that it is sealed. And with any luck, these joints will hold together for at least some time. So anyway, let's get them out of here and into the cockpit. One of them still needs to be cut and trimmed, so let's go through and do that. That's how that fits. Basically, if you remember, there's a small piece at the front which is permanently attached. It's actually screwed to the bulkhead. A piece at the back that doesn't open, and then the center section lifts up, and it'll be hinged from right here, basically just behind the piece I'm going to have to trim piece I'm going to have to steam bend onto there. And well, that steam bending is something I got to think about, because apparently steam bending sapele is almost impossible, so it may have to be lamination. But anyway, I'm pleased with the way it is. Obviously the epoxy creates a slightly different patina than oil would have, but by the time that's varnished, at least I know it's relatively well protected. Yeah, cool. And it's out of the wheelhouse, so we can carry on with more important things. Well, hey there. Well, it's finally time to cut the quadrant, and I can tell you I'm just slightly uneasy about it. Not so much that I'm cutting up a really nice quadrant, which I am doing. The other thing is that I don't want to do it wrong, because I will never find another quadrant that will work perfectly here. I shouldn't say never, there's plenty out there somewhere, but I had enough trouble finding this one. So basically, you can see what I have to do. I only need 90 degrees of the quadrant, because the rudder only turns roughly 45 degrees. That's all I really expect out of it. So the cable only has to be able to come from there to around here. Now it has to go a little bit further, because the way the cable is going to leave the quadrant down there, if you can see, because of the curve of the transom, the cables are going to be slightly forward, meaning I'm going to need a little extra material on here so that when the cables come off the end, they're not a sharp edge. So I'm going to have to cut about here somewhere. Now when I look down into the tank, if you can see, the center line of the rudder shaft is only about 2.5 inches behind this water tank. So when this thing is cut and rotated all the way to 45 degrees, I can only have a maximum of about 2.5 inches left on that. So I think that's all going to be fine. Again, never mind that I have to trim out this timber down here, but we've talked about that already, and we'll talk about it lots more in the next little while. The other thing is, okay, I know I'm going to cut it here somewhere, but how am I going to cut it here? One of the things that I'm going to lose, if you see this hole here, this is what would have held the end of the cable with a turnbuckle, or at least a threaded bolt and an eye. The cable would have come down here and through. You can see that it's got a softened edge there, where the cable would have gone around that corner and around and off. So I'm going to lose that, and that's technically the adjustment or the tensioner. So I'll have to come up with another solution for that, because basically I'm going to cut it about here somewhere. So exactly how I'm going to deal with all these little bits and pieces is yet to be determined, but I got to get to it. So let's get cutting. Okay, so here we go. I've marked off where I'm going to make my cuts. I've got a big damp towel here to catch the bulk of the cuttings. Let's just see how this goes. Of course, this is bronze, so this is non-ferrous, so it's just going to grind like aluminum. There'll be no sparks. I don't think so. There shouldn't be. So pretty safe. Of course, this is definitely safety goggle work. Okay. Right about there. Beautiful. Alright, well, feels a little weird, I'll tell you, but now I can tidy these up, clean off all the extra little nubs that I couldn't make with the cut, ease this up a little bit, and in time I'll make that same nice trough here for the cable that the original ends had. Depending on how I end up with the cable clamp, I don't know how it'll work. Anyway, I'll figure something out. My gosh, that suddenly looks a lot smaller. Anyway, so it's going to go down there, but as you can recall, I have to trim away at a member down here. I'm not going to go to the trouble of getting you down in there to watch me trim that out with the fine tool, my other tool of destruction for today, but it should be pretty straightforward, and then I should be able to weave this in and get that flat onto there, and that's, I'm still a little wondering exactly how that's going to happen, but anyway, let's get to it. No fasteners in that. No fasteners in that. Okay, you don't need to watch anymore. And okay, so the notch is tied it up, and can I get this on? Can I get it to, oh yes I can, beautiful, all right. And, oh, I have what, half to 3/8 of an inch of clearance. Exciting. So let me put the clamp on and see if I can turn it 90 degrees. See where I'm actually going to have to trim these against the tank. Anyway, okay, so now you see, that's exactly 45 because these two arms are 90 degrees apart. In other words, from this arm to this arm is 45 degrees. So if I turn it this far, it hits the tank, but I'm at 45, which is all that's really practical for turning the rudder. It's like it was meant to be there. That's off my boat. This came from Texas. It's a perfect marriage. Okay, I'm super excited by this. I'm going to do a little trimming, tidy this up, ease the edges, but I'm going to say that is a job well done. Now I just need a bunch of cable and shivs, and oh, back to shivs. I have a supply for some really beautiful stainless steel shivs right here. What you doing, boy? And welcome to this week's Beer of the Week. This week's beer is really special to me. This is Spinnaker's Nut Brown. This is the very first beer I ever had when I came to Victoria. And it's from the Spinnaker's Brew Pub, which is just a few minutes down the path here. And it's Canada's earliest brew pub. And it's my local, and it's just an awesome spot. Not all the beers are amazing, but some of them are really pretty good. And it's just a great spot to hang out right on the water. So Nut Brown, I first got here, I went down, I played a game of pool. It was bliss. So let's have a go at Spinnaker's Nut Brown, which is a splendid beer. Dark. It's a roasted roasted malt with a little bit of hop, but not too much. A little bit of floral notes on it. I don't pour ahead on this particular beer because it uses up the carbonation too much. So, cheers. Oh yeah, I'm playing pool. So let me raise a glass to this week's new patrons who are Offer Raz, Rick Miller, Wes Shipman, and on PayPal, the very generous Craig Smith. Thank you all so much. And Craig, shoot me off an email at peter@travelswithgeordie.com because I want to get you a t-shirt. Cheers to all. And this week came in the new Travels with Geordie stickers. So excited about these. It's the new design that's going to be on the new t-shirts starting next week. And this is the very first application of the very first Travels with Geordie t-shirt sticker. And I think it's just a charmer. There you go. I now have a Travels with Geordie beer glass. All right. So these are going to go out to all the patrons, and with my great gratitude, I think I said everyone was going to get one or something. I have 1,000 of them, so I'm going to send out a whole bunch of them. Cheers to you all. See you next week.